What's something you wish you could ask trans people without any judgment? That question was posted to r/AskReddit last week, and it gained a lot of attention. It has over 40,000 comments right now, almost 30,000 upvotes, and has already been locked by the mods. So this should be good. And I actually just stumbled upon this while scrolling through Reddit. And as we all know, seeing trans topics discussed out in the wild can be a bit of a shit show, but I of course am here to take up my mantle as a professional trans man, brave these waters, and answer some controversial trans questions. Do periods go away when you start T? Is there a way to get rid of them without surgery? For some folks, yes. For some folks, no. Some IUDs can stop periods, like Mirena, or for some, taking birth control without the sugar pill week can stop periods. For transmasculine folks, the most reliable way to get rid of periods is by having a full hysterectomy with oophorectomy, which also helps reduce the amount of estrogen in the body. Yup, that is a very solid and concise answer. Speaking from my personal experience, my periods did stop when I started T, and they've never come back, but I have had a few instances of experiencing some minor spotting, but that happens. How do I know you're not just a bunch of rats in trench coats? I am not wearing a trench coat. So, do you get to choose a size? For trans guys, it depends on how much skin they can safely graft, I think, but after the maximum is established, yep. This is true with Phallo, but with Meta, you don't do a skin graft. So yeah, it's just based on the amount of growth you have down there already. Can't really speak from experience on this, but when it comes to Packers and the strap, I do get to choose that. And I can say from experience, in both categories, bigger is not always better. What questions do you wish people would stop asking you? Honestly, as long as people are respectful, they can ask me whatever they want. More often though, I get people assuming things about me rather than asking, so it's nice when they ask. Yeah, I totally agree with that answer. I'd say that 9 times out of 10, if someone's asking me a question, it's coming from a place of genuine curiosity. But of course, there is the classic, have you had the surgery? Which I did make a song and music video several years back about my thoughts on being asked about my wiener, so you can feel free to check that out for further elaboration. Trans men, do you realize the most manly experience you're having is being told you're not a man? That's like 60% of being a man. Is it though? That's nice. That's a nice thing to say. Thank you. But is it? Does sitting down feel different after you get bottom surgery? Interesting where the mind goes. I have never thought about that. That is a good question. At least for this one trans woman, sitting down the 3 months after bottom surgery is a bitch. You're still recovering and all the irritated flesh is very painful. Damn. Then eventually sitting down is the same, except for the fact that I no longer have my privates in the way. However, for me personally, when I sit down, my belly button feels weird because my nerve endings regrew incorrectly. Oh. I got a fear about having my belly button touched or messing with or anything, so I don't like that. Okay, no, what? Okay, wait, hold up. Back up. Today I learned not everyone feels the touch on their belly button and their genitals. Mine's just not wired right. Bruh. My ex used to push my belly button to tease me and I almost threw up. Oh my god. Okay, I don't feel it in my genitals, but I fucking hate it. If people touch my belly button, I get actual mad. Everybody around me knows, you pull that shit with me, there's gonna be a fight. Is it possible for a person to have an orgasm after reassignment surgery? Not a doctor, but my understanding of the process of creating the genitals would seem to make that perspective incredibly dim. The sheer number of nerve endings in the clitoris and tip of the penis make it seem impossible enough to survive the surgery to provide the same sensations. Actually, yes, you definitely can, because basically they're taking those parts and making them into the other parts. So the nerves, the sensation, all of this, they want to preserve it. How far along the FTM process do you start to have bowel movements? Since everyone knows girls don't poop, does it start after you've been on testosterone long enough or only post-op? As soon as I inserted the syringe into my arm, I shit my pants. Hadn't even pressed down the needle yet. You do your shots in your arm? This video is sponsored by Harry's. I have sensitive skin and I've tried a lot of razors. 3 years ago, I bought a razor from Harry's. I have not used a single razor from another brand since. To this day, it's the only one I'll use. So when my go-to brand reached out for a sponsorship, I was like, say no more. Listen, you can keep the talking points. I already know about the weighted handle made from 50% recycled plastic. I am familiar with the high-quality blades complete with precision trimmer and flex hinge. I am well acquainted with the foaming shave gel suitable for sensitive skin with aloe and hyaluronic acid. But what I didn't know is that by branding their razors as unisex, they're actually keeping the price price is fair for everyone. I looked it up, I found out that women pay an average of 25% more for the same razors, but not with Harry's because they're not pulling any of that pink tax crap, and I do really appreciate that. Whether you're a Harry, a Mary, or a non-binary, redeem your starter set. That comes with the new 2-tone handle, a 5-blade razor, a blade cover, and foaming shave gel for just $3 by clicking my link in the description below. Is there any part of you that is worried that it is just a phase? Yeah, that's why it took me over 10 years to accept it and begin my transition. That is a great response. For me, I've always said the hardest person in the world to come out to was myself, because it's not like you're getting an acceptance letter in the mail. Congratulations, you are trans. Here's your agenda. So it's just something that you have to come to terms with over time, because a lot of us at that point are in a position where it is not something that we want to be true. You know, a lot of us don't understand that we're experiencing gender dysphoria, and so maybe doubt that that's what's going on and think that, you know, maybe it's not this. Maybe it's not so bad that I need to take action and transition and do something about this, because it's like once you acknowledge it, then it's real. And I know I personally started my transition there. I was well aware that I had gender dysphoria long before I made the decision to transition. I tried to be happy as a girl. I grew my hair out. I tried to be feminine. I tried to just be a masculine girl too. And everything that I did to try to ease my discomfort around my gender just made it worse by highlighting that the problem was simply that I was still a boy, no matter what I did to try to be a girl. So yeah, the answer is yes. But now, 9 years in, pretty sure it's not a phase. For those born with unisex names such as Alex, do you still feel the need to change your name to reflect your new identity? My sister was born with a unisex name but decided to change it when she transitioned. She chose an old lady type of name. I think it makes it easier for people that have known her since before she transitioned to get her pronouns right. Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like a brand new association kind of thing. But I do know a lot of trans people who keep their names, and I actually made a video about that. So I'm going to link that. It's very interesting. I talked to some of my trans friends who kept their old names. If, for example, someone is born male but transitions to female and they're sexually attracted to men, are they considered gay prior to the transition, then straight after the transition? Yes. Sexuality and gender are different. So I, as a trans man, can be gay, straight, bisexual, pansexual, what have you, just like a cis man. And that would be the proper way to describe it. You would change the language to reflect the gender transition. So she would be straight, even though she was previously gay, because now she's a girl that's attracted to guys. Do non-binary people or people who are gender fluid count as trans, even if they still mostly present as their assigned gender at birth with no intent to change? Yes, transgender is an umbrella term, which encompasses everyone who doesn't identify with the gender as assigned to them based on their sex at birth. So according to the definition of transgender, yes. Now, if a non-binary person doesn't identify as transgender, that's fine. Let's respect that. You know, but I'd always rather be overly inclusive than risk not including someone who should be part of the community. But there is the term transsexual, which applies to people who are medically transitioning. Even though I am a transgender person and a transsexual person, technically, I don't really call myself a transsexual. I just say that I'm trans. What does it mean when you feel like a girl or boy? I'm biologically female and I identify as a woman, but I don't feel like a woman. I just am. So what do you mean by that? This is what confuses me the most. Like, I can understand homosexuality because while I'm not attracted to the same sex, I do feel sexual attraction, but I don't really feel a sense of gender identity, so it's hard for me to empathize that that feeling could be directed wrongly. I'm a trans woman who transitioned 20 years ago, and I share your confusion, to the point where the actual joke in trans spaces used to be nobody other than Shania Twain feels like a woman. I have no idea what identifying as a woman means, other than needing my body to be physically female, which was the whole point of me transitioning. Otherwise, the only feeling in that context was really the distress of my brain not matching my body, i.e. the pain and the distress from the disconnect. In that sense, it would be like talking about feeling the bones in your body, i.e. your bones don't feel like anything unless something goes wrong, like snapping one in half. So in order for you to understand what I feel, it would require the same kind of disconnect, i.e. taking cross-sex hormones to start transitioning your body towards the wrong sex. That is a really great way to describe physical dysphoria. Like feeling your bones. You don't feel them unless something is wrong. So that's why you don't feel your gender unless something is wrong. That's really good. And there's of course the aspect of social dysphoria. We don't realize it, but we are constantly being gendered. So while you might not realize that pretty much everyone that you talk to or meet is actually validating your gender. And for a trans person who's experiencing that social dysphoria, it's the opposite. Your gender is being constantly invalidated from these social interactions. And as trans people, I think we notice a lot more just how gendered everything is. So that's why, maybe when people are like, who cares? Just be a masculine woman. Like, why do you need to be seen as a guy? Like, you really don't understand how different these two spaces are. I've lived as a girl, I've lived as a guy. Very, very different experiences. But yeah, that bone example was great. A lot of people are really meshing with that. I think this nails it. When we were young, my sister had to take a hormonal medication for endometriosis. They were supposed to stop it before the masculinizing effect took place, but her voice deepened a bit. She felt her chest was flatter and she became suicidal. It was just totally wrong for her body and her mind. I saw the same thing with a male colleague who was on testosterone blockers, one of the same ones trans women use, for prostate cancer. He was miserable and suddenly needed to prove his manliness. It was painful to be around him. I've seen trans people have the opposite effect. When starting hormones, everything just felt right. Exactly, yes. Also the experience of gender euphoria, that is, feeling your gender as well, I guess. I don't have a question. I just want to say that this has been great to read. I didn't scroll all the way to the bottom, but what I saw has been uncharacteristically respectful and informative. All the questions I had that I've been afraid to ask have been answered, and they make sense as well. Thanks. Just don't sort by controversial. Oh God. Should we see? Should we take a look? Let's answer a couple more, and then we're going to sort this by controversial and get upset. That might be fun. Does physical surgery / modification help, as it's more of a mental thing? I don't love the idea of calling it a mental thing because it's not isolated within a trans person's head. You don't just experience your gender in a vacuum. Like I said earlier, a lot of people aren't aware of it, but you are constantly being gendered and having your gender either validated or invalidated. But yeah, even people who like to approach gender dysphoria as like a mental disorder, the treatment for said disorder is to transition. You can't change how you identify, but you can change how you present in order to change how you view yourself and how you are perceived by others in a way that matches how you identify in order to ease that pain and that disconnect. If gender roles didn't exist and men and women were actually treated equally, men can wear dresses, women can be buff, nobody cares. Would all trans people still be trans? What about non-binary? How much of it is wanting to be physically different and how much of it is not identifying with the gender role? That's a great question. I think that it varies for trans people. Like earlier when we talked about transgender being an umbrella term, there are a lot of different people with a lot of different experiences that fall under that umbrella. Like I would say if there is no gender roles, then social dysphoria would probably be eliminated. So anyone who doesn't have physical dysphoria probably wouldn't, be changing anything because there would be nothing to change. But I do still think that physical dysphoria would still be present even if the social aspect of gender wasn't a part of it. But for me personally, as someone who just has an abundance, a nice little array of all different types of dysphoria, I probably wouldn't transition personally. And I know that sounds crazy. Even though I do have physical dysphoria, right now I haven't had any surgeries and it sucks. But then again, because of the voice and the beard, I don't know, maybe I would still transition. God. Yeah, I don't fucking know. But that's a very thought-provoking question, very interesting. I would ask, is it offensive when others refer to you as trans woman or trans man rather than woman or man? No. For me personally, no. But that's because in the context when people call me a trans man is usually is like in a conversation where that's actually relevant, which is pretty often. I'm getting called a trans man all the time because it's something that is a big part of my life, not just within my trans identity, but my job, my social media, lots of things that I do. But I would not be a fan if I was being called trans man in a way that is othering. If it's not necessary, if it doesn't make sense in the conversation, if it's being used only to differentiate me from cis men in a way that's intentionally kind of trying to invalidate my identity. If someone said, men and trans men like yourself, I don't think I would be a fan of that. Because trans men are men, so we don't need to make that distinction. So, it just depends on how they're saying it. Does the porn industry's depiction of trans people being highly sexualized as women who happen to have a penis bother you or harm your self-view? I actually saw a tweet today that I think kind of applies here. Trans women and femmes are seen as hypersexual because they are awarded the double whammy of both male and female sexualization simultaneously. Their behavior is deemed to be sexually predatory, as men are assumed to be, and their feminine presentation is seen as sexual solicitation. In reality, trans women are no more or less sexual than any other group. They are just the victims of a culture of sexualization that heteronormative society engages in constantly. I'm a lesbian, but is it rude for me to say I wouldn't be sexually intimate with a trans woman if she hasn't had bottom surgery? Being trans isn't the issue, but I do not want a penis anywhere in/near me in that context. Uh-oh, here it is. The big controversial topic. If you don't find someone sexually attractive because of their body parts, that isn't transphobic. Believe it or not, most of us understand that. I have no idea where the whole lesbians have to be attracted to trans girls came from. I don't think anybody said that, but it's whack as fuck. You don't need to find any trans people attractive in any extent. You just need to, like, not hate us for that. The framing of trans women as predatory for just trying to date literally is transphobic. But not wanting to sleep with someone who doesn't have the parts that you like isn't. It is not transphobic to not want to sleep with a trans person. But making this huge fucking thing about it, and I'm not saying that this is what the person in here is doing, but the bigger conversation around this specific topic, broadcasting constantly that you're not attracted to trans people, complaining that a trans person hits on you, and framing it as trans women forcing themselves on helpless lesbian women. It just further enforces the trans misogyny. In other words, sleep with whoever you want to sleep with, but just shut the fuck up about it. Like, this topic itself has become almost like a dog whistle for TERFs to try to frame trans women as predatory and, forcing themselves on women, which just isn't happening. Okay, I think I'm ready to check those controversial comments. Oh god. Wow, a lot of them have been removed by the mods. Truly doing God's work out here. Did you think about therapy before body-altering surgery or drugs? Yes, I was required to go to therapy before I could get any drugs. and I'm yet to have any body-altering surgeries. Why not take therapy? Okay, I'm seeing a trend. Why can't you take criticism like the rest of us? We're all people with faults. Yes, we are all people with faults. We are individuals, not a monolith that collectively every single one of us, reacts to criticism the same way. We can, but gender dysphoria and transition are two very complicated, nuanced subjects that most people are pretty ignorant about. That's true. What I'm mainly alluding to is the outrage towards comedians for joking about transgender people. Like, there's jokes about all races and people. In my opinion, if certain groups start becoming untouchable in the sense you can't joke about said group, then that will cause more separation and anger. Everyone is equal in my eyes. I'm not transphobic. I hate everyone equally. And nobody's saying that trans people need to be off limits or untouchable or that you can't joke about us. The problem is that the jokes are literally transphobic. And instead of learning what is and what isn't transphobic and putting in the effort to listen to trans people and take criticism and that feedback in order to, craft some jokes that are funny without being transphobic, these comedians just want to say, oh, I'm being silenced. Cancel culture. You can't say anything these days. When you can, but it doesn't mean that people can't respond to the things that you're saying and tell you that they are transphobic. So what's up? Get fucked. Isn't the whole point of the transgender movement is that we're all the same? Then how come now all of a sudden, because your subject is very complicated, you get to have special privileges and not taking criticism like the rest of us? All right. Why can't you just be more feminine/masculine? Why go through the trouble of forcing everyone else to take part in your transition by having to change how we refer to you and just accept that you're a super feminine man or super masculine female? All right. That's like saying you're forcing everyone to take part in your marriage by changing your last name. Can't you just keep that between the two of you? Sicko. This is a sincere question. Have you considered that the fact that the gender theory movement relies so heavily on censorship and deleting opposing views might mean that there's something fundamentally incorrect about its basis? Wow, there's a lot of claims there. I mean, do we even need to interact with someone who says gender theory movement? This is a sincere question. Why they feel everyone should accept them and not judge them when they couldn't accept themselves. You know, not choosing to continue to live as our assigned gender, it doesn't mean that we're not accepting ourselves. It means that we are accepting ourselves as trans people. It just seems made up. I like that. How many are doing it for attention and not because they're actually unsure of how they want to be in life? Probably not many. I've met a lot of trans people. I have never met someone who was pretending to be trans for attention, for any reason whatsoever, really. Why is literally any attack on your character transphobia? As if you can't be critiqued like the rest of the world without it being somehow scared of trans people. Seems like you're projecting one experience onto the entire trans community, which is transphobic. Which is kind of transphobic. People frequently are accidentally expressing internalized bias they don't realize they have when they insult trans people. Not always, but a lot of the time people insult trans people for things they wouldn't insult a cis person for. For example, people are a lot less likely to call out a cis girl for being rude than a trans woman for the exact same act. It's not usually helpful to just call a person transphobic and leave it at that, but it's also not usually helpful to attack someone's character in the first place, so if you're frequently getting called transphobic, maybe try insulting less people. That's lovely. That's very good. Alright folks, testosterone's hitting. I gotta get out of here. I'm too sweaty. But I've had a good time here today, folks, so thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out Harry's. Alright, redeem that trial set. All you gotta do is go to that link in the description. So thanks again, Harry's, for sponsoring. Thank you folks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.